If you stand on my porch at sunset, you can hear the neighborhood breathing. Not loud, not obvious, just the faint symphony of lives pressed close together. A screen door snapping shut, a sprinkler ticking across a lawn, a child laughing and someone shushing them. And always curtains shifting. It's the kind of place people call peaceful. The kind of place realtors describe as quiet and stable. But I learned very quickly that quiet isn't always kind. Quiet can watch. Quiet can judge. Quiet can sharpen itself into something pointed and sparkling. But when I first arrived, I didn't know any of that. At the time, I was just a woman searching for a beginning that didn't sting. The moving truck had barely rolled away when the weight of my decision settled in. I had left my old life completely behind. The city, the familiar coffee shop where baristas knew my name, the apartment I once decorated with warm neutrals and soft golds, the friends who were kind but distant. No one was cruel, yet no one stayed long either. I came here for quiet, I told myself. For space to start over. The house I bought, well, more like rescued, was a cheerful two-story with fading yellow paint and white shutters that needed replacing. The porch was wide and inviting, the kind that begged for rocking chairs and lazy Saturday lemonade. The garden out front had been neglected, but I knew how to coax life back into tired things. That had once been my job. I used to be an interior decorator, someone people called when they wanted their homes to feel like themselves, even when they didn't know who that was. Funny how I could do that for everyone but me. I remember rolling my last box inside, wiping sweat from my forehead, and saying out loud to no one, "New place, new life, new me." And the house, in its dusty silence, seemed to exhale with me. The cul-de-sac curved like a teardrop, 12 houses forming a gentle circle of manicured lawns and trimmed hedges. Every house was neat, not just clean managed. There's a difference. Bird feeders matched paint palettes. Shrubs were sculpted into symmetrical domes. Front porch furniture coordinated with seasonal wreaths. This wasn't a street. This was a stage. And just like any stage, it had its audience. I didn't see faces at first, just movement behind windows. Curtains shifting. Blinds lifted just enough. A silhouette pausing, watching, evaluating. "New girl," I imagined them saying. "Let's see." But I smiled anyway. Hopeful, open, like the kind of person I wanted to be again. The first person who approached me came with a plate of cookies and no smile. Mrs. Cerise Dallow, though she would later insist I call her Cerise, was short, soft-spoken, and moved like someone who measured every step with purpose. Her brown-gray hair was tied back in a bun, and she wore a long olive cardigan even though the day was warm. Retired school principal. I learned that later, but she still had the air of someone who could quiet a room with one raised eyebrow. "Welcome," she said simply, offering the plate. The cookies were oatmeal. No chocolate. Not even raisins. "Thank you," I smiled. "I'm Rhea." "I know," she said. Not unkindly. Just knowingly. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "People notice things here," she explained gently, her voice like a breeze slipping through lace curtains. "That's not always a bad thing. But..." She paused, choosing her next words like they were glass. "Some people don't talk to you," she said. "They talk about you." I blinked, surprised by how directly she said it. "Oh," I replied, unsure whether to laugh or take it seriously. She gave a small, almost sad smile. "You'll see." Then she walked away, leaving me holding cookies that suddenly felt heavy. I heard her before I saw her. A bright, high-pitched trill of laughter traveling down the sidewalk like perfume. "Oh my God, hi!" The new neighbor. She practically glided across the lawn. Glynn Arlena was, to put it simply, too much. Too put together. Too polished. Too enthusiastic. Too attentive in a way that made you feel exposed. Her hair was the exact shade of honey blonde that only comes from expensive salons. Her makeup was flawless in that I woke up like this way that took 40 minutes and the right ring light. She wore a peach-colored blouse and white pants that somehow weren't dirty from grass or life or reality. She smelled like vanilla and ambition. "I'm Glynn," she said, extending her hand with sparkling rings I'd seen in catalogs. "I run, well, everything around here." She laughed like she'd made a joke, but something about her eyes suggested she meant every word. "And you are Rhea, I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was soft. Too soft. Like she practiced it. Oh, such a pretty name, she cooed. The way she said it sounded like she was complimenting a pet. Then, with the smoothest transition I've ever seen, her eyes flicked over me. My sneakers, messy bun, paint-stained shirt, assessing, arranging, categorizing. You must be exhausted. Moving is so emotionally taxing, she said in a tone that implied emotional fragility was unattractive. But don't worry. She touched my arm lightly. We're a close neighborhood, and we keep an eye on things. She smiled. And something cold moved beneath my skin. You know those compliments that feel like they're made of lace dipped in vinegar? That was Glynn. You have such a natural look. It's refreshing. Really. Very brave. I love how you're not afraid to be casual. We get all types here. Diversity is charming. Every sentence was an embroidered blade. But she said them so gently, so pleasantly, that it would sound crazy to accuse her of anything. That's the thing about people like Glynn. They don't insult. They subtract you. One airy sentence at a time. But I still smiled. Still nodded. Still tried. I wanted to believe I could belong here. That evening, when I stepped onto my porch again, the windows flickered with movement. Someone peeking. Someone whispering. Someone calling someone else. Not loud enough to hear. Just loud enough to feel. But I told myself this was what community looked like. People noticing. People caring. I didn't yet understand that watching is not always welcoming. The sun dipped low, coloring the street gold. I sat on my porch swing, the only piece of furniture I'd placed so far. It groaned a little under my weight, but the sound was comforting. I didn't hear Cerise approach. She moved quiet, like a memory. She stopped beside the porch and rested her hands on the railing. Pretty evening, she said. Beautiful, I replied. We watched the sun melt. Then she spoke, soft enough that only I could hear. That woman, she said, nodding subtly toward Glynn's house. Keep your heart guarded. I swallowed. Why? I asked. She exhaled, like she'd seen this play out too many times already. Because she smiles with her teeth, Cerise said. But never with her soul. I let the words hang in the warm air. Then, too hopeful, too trusting to me, I laughed it off. I'll be fine, I said. Cerise gave me a look that held both tenderness and warning. I hope so, she said quietly. Then she walked home. I should have listened. But beginnings make us blind. And the curtains kept moving. Watching. Waiting. Measuring. The first incident happened on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday that feels like it's made of sighs. Humid, slow, sticky. The sky a dull pale blue that looked tired and overworked. I was halfway through arranging a shelf of ceramic vases in the living room, the kind of little aesthetic task that helps a new house feel like home, when I heard the sound of a delivery truck pulling up. A package. Nothing major, just a set of gardening tools I'd ordered so I could start bringing the neglected front yard back to life. I had even planned to spend the afternoon kneeling in the soil, hands dirty, hair pinned messily out of my face, the sun warming my shoulders. A therapeutic kind of day. I stepped out to the porch just in time to see the delivery guy leave the box on the steps. He gave a friendly wave. I waved back. This was normal. Simple. I brought the box inside, placed it on the kitchen table, made tea, and continued unpacking. The day moved the way soft days do, unremarkably, but peacefully. It wasn't until the next morning that anything felt off. I woke early, sunlight pooling through the blinds and painting streaks on the rug. I made myself a quiet breakfast, toast with honey, tea steeped just right. I stood at the window, listening to sprinklers and distant dogs. Then my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Glynn standing there, holding a cup of iced coffee in one manicured hand and wearing that peach-perfect smile that always looked seconds away from breaking. Morning, she sang as though we'd been best friends for years. I blinked. Good morning. Her eyes glittered with the sort of concern that doesn't come from caring. I just came by because I heard about your package. The pause before package was long. Meaningful. Performed. I frowned. What about it? Oh, she said sweetly, tilting her head. It went missing, didn't it? No, I said slowly. It didn't. It arrived yesterday. I brought it in myself. She blinked, lips lifting just slightly higher, too controlled. Oh, she laughed lightly. That's such a relief. We were all worried. Someone said they saw a box on your porch, and then later, it wasn't there. She took a sip of her iced coffee, straw clicking softly against ice. It had everyone nervous. I stared at her. There was everyone. Meaning, conversations had occurred. Meaning, eyes had watched me. Meaning, I was already being discussed. I smiled politely anyway. It was too early for war. Well, I said, everything's fine. Nothing missing. Glynn's expression flickered, only for a feather second. But I saw it. Disappointment. Good, she said, regaining her brightness. It's just, packages disappear sometimes here. And when new people move in, things can get confusing. The sentence pressed just lightly enough to sting without bruising. I didn't respond. Well, she chirped, glad it worked out. You'll let us know if anything odd happens, right? A question coated in sugar, sharp underneath. Of course, I said. She waved, turned, and walked back to her house, steps graceful, knowing. The moment her front door shut, I felt something cold settle in my gut. Something wasn't right later that afternoon when I went outside to water the patchy lawn. I noticed it. Eyes. Not openly. Not rudely. Just present. A woman walking her dog slowed as she passed, smiling at me too long. A group of kids on scooters paused, whispering to each other. A man across the street raised his hand in a wave, but his eyes stayed narrowed. I felt it like humidity, invisible but heavy. Something was being said. I didn't know what yet, but I could feel it took Nutty, Jovi Pell, to explain the system. We met by accident. I was fixing a loose shutter on the porch when I heard a bag of peanuts tear loudly and a small avalanche of shells scatter across the sidewalk. Come on, someone groaned. I looked up to see a lanky guy about late 20s, chestnut hair falling haphazardly across his forehead, wearing pajama pants and a work lanyard from the local hospital. He looked like a raccoon that had learned to wear human clothing. He stared at the fallen peanuts with genuine devastation. Then he looked at me. You ever have one of those days where even the peanuts betray you? I laughed. A real laugh. The first since the move. Every day for the last year, I said. He grinned, pointing at me dramatically. A fellow sufferer. I'm Jovi, but everyone calls me Nutty. I don't know if it's because I eat peanuts constantly or because I am a peanut. But I have accepted this as my identity. He scooped the peanuts back into the bag with reverence. I liked him immediately. We talked. Easy. Light. Real. And then, mid-sentence, his expression shifted as though a cloud passed over the sun. So, you heard about the package thing, huh? My stomach tightened. Yes. Apparently it was a topic. Nutty rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, so this neighborhood has 2 communication highways. And both of them move faster than the speed of light. He held up one finger. Facebook group, the perfect cul-de-sac. Only residents allowed. Then another finger. What's up, Mom Squad? You don't need to be a mom. They just need a reason to judge you. I blinked. I'm not in either. Oh, you will be, he said with the tone of someone who has seen war. They add everyone. Whether you want in or not. He leaned closer, lowering his voice dramatically. Someone, guess who, posted that your package went missing. My chest tightened. I didn't need to guess. And then Nutty continued. Someone else said that maybe you took it inside to make it look like something happened. I froze. Why would anyone think that? Nutty shrugged, chewing a peanut. Because Glynn suggested it. And Glynn is the sun around which all insecure planets orbit. The image was so vivid I choked on a laugh. Then I stopped laughing. Because the pieces connected. Yesterday's comment. Moving is emotionally taxing. This morning. Things get confusing. Not concern. Not warning. Narrative building. She wasn't spreading rumors. She was crafting a character for me. The broken new girl. The unstable new woman. The center of whispered pity. Oh, I breathed. Quiet. Sharp. Understanding. Nutty nodded like a doctor delivering a diagnosis. Yep. Over the next few days, the change became obvious. A woman at the mailbox gave me the smile people reserve for fragile things. Two dads chatting by their driveways went silent when I walked past. A teen girl whispered to another, not looking away from me. The eyes weren't curious anymore. They were deciding who I was. And the decision wasn't mine. I walked slower, stood straighter, smiled at everyone, became careful with my expressions. Because I could feel it. Everything I did now meant something to them. But I stayed calm. I had learned in my past life that defending yourself too early looks like guilt. So I waited, watched, listened, and I noticed something else. Whenever gossip moved, Glynn was somewhere nearby, not speaking, not leading, but always present. Like a conductor who never lifts her hands, yet the orchestra plays anyway. BY Friday evening, the rumor had shape. Rhea is emotionally unstable. She's lonely. She caused a scene over a package to get attention. She moved here because something happened. Maybe a breakup. Maybe something worse. None of this was said outright. But I heard the tone in people's voices. Felt the pity in their smiles. Saw the curiosity flicker like candlelight behind their eyes. I carried my gardening tools to the flower bed that evening and dug into the soil, each strike of the trowel sharper, more deliberate. The earth broke easily. I did not. I stayed quiet. The sky glowed violet behind the houses. And somewhere across the street, behind perfect peach curtains, I knew Glynn was watching. That was the night I realized. Gossip wasn't loud here. It was strategic controlled. Directed. A dance choreographed by smiles. And I was the new main character. But they did not know one thing. I don't break. I redesign. I rebuild. I rearrange rooms and entire lives for a living. And I had not yet begun. I simply brushed the dirt from my hands, stood up, and let the neighborhood keep watching. Because the show was only just beginning, I first heard the nickname from a child's voice. High-pitched, carefree, cruel only because children imitate cruelty they do not understand. I was kneeling in the front yard, loosening the hardened soil around a row of marigolds I'd planted 2 days earlier. Their petals were already beginning to lift, yellow and bright, little suns waking up. I was humming softly, a tune I couldn't remember the origin of but always found myself drifting into when I worked with my hands. Then the voices came. 2 kids on scooters rolled past on the sidewalk, their wheels clacking rhythmically against the seams of the pavement. The older one, maybe 10 or 11, whispered to the younger. Look, that's her." The younger looked, eyes wide and shining with curiosity the way only children can manage. "Who?" "Miss Sunflower," the older said, giggling into her palm. "Miss Sunflower who cries at night." The younger gasped, delighted, entertained, hungry for story. "Does she really cry?" "Oh yeah," the older said confidently, with the certainty of someone repeating something they'd been told enough times to accept as fact. "My mom said she's fragile." They scooted off, laughing, not even looking back. I didn't drop the trowel. I didn't flinch. The sunlight stayed warm on my shoulders. But my breath went quiet. Miss Sunflower. I knew exactly where that came from. On my first day here, a few neighbor kids had seen me tending to the neglected front garden and had asked what I was planting. I told them sunflowers. They liked that. One of them had pointed at the small sunflower pendant I wore and said, "Miss Sunflower." It was innocent then. But gossip doesn't create new words. It stains the old ones. Miss Sunflower had become Miss Sunflower who cries at night. I didn't cry at night. But rumors don't need truth. They need shape. And Glynn knew how to sculpt air into something heavy. I sat back on my heels and let the trowel rest on the dirt. The marigold swayed in the breeze. Bright, fragile, reaching. My throat felt tight, not from sadness, but from something sharper. Something aware. I stood and dusted the soil from my hands. Across the street, a curtain moved. Not fully. Just enough. Watching. Always watching. The rumors grew roots quickly. Children spread them first because children always do. They absorb tones from adults. The softness, the pity, the whispered concern that is not concern at all but performance. And they reshape it into something simpler, something sharper. They called me names I could almost laugh at. Almost. Miss Sunflower who can't sleep. Miss Sunflower who ran away from her old town. Miss Sunflower who talks to herself. The last one actually made me laugh one evening as I watered the grass. I did talk to myself sometimes. I always had. It helped me think. But now, even my private habits had become neighborhood lore. But I didn't react. That was the part Glynn didn't expect. She was waiting for me to break. For me to run crying to someone. For me to confront her publicly. For me to try to defend myself. Because the moment someone tries to defend themselves against a rumor, the rumor becomes real. No, I would not play on her stage. Not yet. I learned the structure of the rumor network slowly, the way one learns the layout of a house by how sound moves inside it. A conversation on a porch at dusk, too quiet to hear words, but not quiet enough to feel innocent. A cluster of women standing by a mailbox, voices lowered and heads leaned in like flowers drawn toward poison. A text notification popping up on someone's phone screen as they glanced at me, their expression flickering with something new. Sympathy not earned, or suspicion not deserved. The neighborhood didn't gossip loudly. They gossiped gently. They spoke with concern. They used soft tones. They furrowed brows and exhaled slowly. Oh, I just hope she's okay. It must be so hard for her. We shouldn't judge, but we should stay aware. It was pity disguised as kindness. And that kind of rumor is the most dangerous, because no one can accuse it of malice. Not even the person being wounded by it. I didn't know the full shape of the story until I visited the corner store one afternoon. I'd gone to buy potting soil, kneeling to lift the bag when I heard two women speaking near the refrigerator aisle. Their voices were hushed in that careful way that means they absolutely want to be overheard. I heard she moved here because of, because of a man, right? The second whispered back. Something messy. And now she's lonely. Poor thing. I hope she doesn't spiral. My hands tightened on the bag, plastic crackling. So that was the narrative. Glynn hadn't just painted me sad. She'd painted me unstable. A woman escaping heartbreak. A woman fragile and unpredictable. A woman who might need to be handled carefully. No accusations. No insults. Just concern. The most elegant weapon in the world. I found myself walking home slower. Not in defeat, but in contemplation. Every step measured. Every thought sharpening. This was not about a package. This was not about my garden. This was not even about me. This was about power. Social ecosystems always have a queen bee, and queen bees survive by stinging before they are threatened. But I was not threatening her. Not yet. Glynn was attacking a ghost. And ghosts do not bleed, Mrs. Cerise found me on my porch again that evening. She didn't ask. She didn't pry. She simply sat down on the step beside me, knitting needles in her hands, working slowly, patiently, with the ease of someone who has seen too many cycles of human nature to be startled by any of it. I watched her yarn loop and pull and knot. She spoke without looking at me. Children repeat the stories they hear at home, she murmured. I nodded. She's spreading it in the way women like her always do. Not loud. Not directly. Not with fists. Cerise's eyes flicked toward Glynn's house without turning her head. She tells stories with concern. She adjusts her tone. She sighs. She says, I just worry for her, in a voice soft enough to sound holy. I swallowed. And people listen, I said quietly. Cerise nodded once. A liar needs an audience, she said, each word slow, heavy placed. You can either be the stage or the spotlight. I looked at her, not breathing. And you, she continued, leveling her gaze on me, have the patience to wait, and the eyes to see where the cracks will come. I didn't ask how she knew. She already understood. I exhaled slowly. Silence, then. For now, she agreed. We sat like that until the sun went down. The streetlights flickered on. Curtains shifted. Whispers moved like wind. And I did nothing. Nothing at all. Because they believed I was fragile. Because they believed I was quiet. Because they believed they knew me. And the most powerful moment in any story is the second before the audience realizes. They've been watching the wrong character the whole time. The envelope was pale pink, thick, and sealed with a wax stamp shaped like a rose. It had been slipped under my door sometime in the early morning, when the sprinklers were still ticking and the neighborhood was quiet enough to hear the soft thrum of its own heartbeat. I found it when I stepped outside to water the potted basil on my porch. If you've made it this far, you're clearly enjoying the video, so don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment below, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. At first glance, it looked like something from a wedding or an exclusive charity dinner. The kind of stationery that suggested importance, intention, and, most of all, performance. My name was written in cursive across the front. Rhea. Soft. Feminine. As if whispered. Inside, the card smelled faintly of jasmine and something sharper underneath. The message itself was simple. Friday Brunch Circle. Hosted by Glynn, 10 a.m., 13 Primrose Lane. Bring a dish if you'd like. We'd love to get to know you better. There it was again. That phrase I'd come to recognize. The one that sounded warm but was really a velvet-wrapped hook. Get to know you. Which really meant, learn your weak points. Examine your stitching. Decide where to pull. But I held the card for a long moment, letting the morning sun warm my fingers, and I made a decision. I would go. Not to prove anything. Not to submit. Not even to smooth things over. I would go because I needed to see the game board from the inside. Because there are some things you simply cannot understand from the sidewalk. The rest of the week passed like a slow storm. I could feel the anticipation in the air. Not mine, theirs. Eyes followed me more openly. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Even the children watched me with the curious reverence one might give to a character in a story already half-written. Miss Sunflower. The one who cries at night. Rumor had bloomed into folklore startlingly fast. I said nothing. I looked no one in the eye longer than necessary. I smiled when appropriate. I watered my basil. I took early walks. I stayed calm. Mrs. Cerise noticed. You're preparing, she said one evening when she saw me outside, pruning the tiny lemon tree by my window. She always spoke as though she had already been mid-conversation with me in her mind. I didn't ask how she knew. I simply replied, yes. She nodded approvingly. Don't let them think you're nervous, she said. Fear wets the soil, and rumors grow best in damp earth. Her metaphors were strange, but always true. Friday came with the kind of sunshine that suggested innocence. I wore a soft cream blouse and tailored linen pants. Nothing flashy, nothing new, nothing that could be mistaken for either effort or apology. I baked a lemon loaf. Simple, fragrant, not overly sweet. Neutral. I carried it with me as I walked to Glynn's house. Number 13, though the neighborhood real estate brochure had pretended the number didn't exist. They had called it 12A on paper, but the metal plaque by the door told the truth. 13. Of course. The house was immaculate. Not beautiful, curated. Trimmed hedges, soft blue shutters, a wreath that changed seasonally, even though we were still weeks from any holiday. The kind of home that wanted to be photographed. The door opened before I knocked. Rhea. Glynn's voice came out bright and effervescent, like champagne poured too fast. You look lovely. Come in, come in. Her perfume was floral, but with an acidity that lingered. Something expensive. Something meant to impress and disarm at the same time. The living room was full. Women sat on couches and stools and bar chairs, wine glasses in hand, though it was only 10. They were smiling, but their eyes were doing something else entirely. Surveying. Labeling. Sorting. Glynn placed a hand lightly, too lightly, on the small of my back and guided me to the center of the room, like a prize exhibit unveiled for viewing. Everyone, this is Rhea, she announced with the smooth authority of someone who believed introductions were her sacred duty. Oh, we know, someone murmured with a laugh. I didn't have to look to know the laugh wasn't friendly. I placed the lemon loaf on the table. There were 3 other lemon loaves already there. A statement disguised as coincidence. One woman, tall, red-haired, wearing a pearl headband, leaned in with a smile that tugged too wide. So, Rhea, she began, where did you really move from? The room quieted, just enough to make the silence noticeable. I smiled back, gently, like laying down a card I had always intended to play. I moved from where I lived before, I said. Like most people. There was a flicker in her expression. Surprise, then irritation. Glynn laughed lightly, stepping in. "Oh, she's funny," she said. "We love humor here. It keeps things from getting too serious. We're all about support and connection." Her tone was sweet. Her eyes were not. Another woman spoke up, younger, maybe early 30s, holding a baby balanced on her hip. "Were you alone before?" she asked, voice soft but edged, as if the question itself were a fishing hook. I met her gaze. "No one is ever really alone," I said. A murmur spread, delicate, unreadable. Some approval, some confusion, some irritation. Glynn watched me. Really watched. The kind of observation that seeks entry points. Weak seams. Places where pressure might pry open something private. For the first time, she didn't smile immediately. She understood that I had shown up armored. Not flashy armor. Not loud armor. But quiet armor. The kind built slowly like bone. She recovered with a tinkling laugh. "Well, let's eat, shall we?" Everyone moved at once. Plates, pastries, chatter. But the tone had shifted, however slightly. They were no longer just analyzing me. They were adjusting, reacting, reconsidering. As conversations swirled, I stayed still, not silent, but controlled, listening more than speaking, noticing more than responding. The dynamics became clear, quickly. Glynn was the sun. Every orbit depended on her warmth, or her burn. Mrs. Alderine, pearls, white wine at 10 a.m., was the advisor, quick glances seeking approval. Unia, the young mother, was the empath or played one. Lola, headband, sharp questions, was the challenger, but only within boundaries Glynn approved. The others floated, filling in spaces to keep the structure stable. A social monarchy disguised as friendship. Every compliment was a test. Every question was a probe. Every smile was a calculation, and I recognized something. This wasn't a brunch gathering. This was court. And Glynn was queen. But even queens can be dethroned. Not through force. Through isolation. Through redirection. Through mirrors. I didn't strike. Not yet. But I let my silence turn intentional, the way Mrs. Cerise had once suggested. A stage or a spotlight. I chose spotlight. I let Glynn feel watched. Just once. Her eyes flickered. And I knew she felt it. The smallest shift, invisible to everyone else, but unmistakable between us. Her smile tightened, only for a breath. And that was enough. When I left, the afternoon sun was warm, the sidewalk glowing gold. The breeze carried the scent of jasmine from someone's garden. From behind her immaculate curtains, I felt Glynn watching. Not triumphant, not curious, but something new. Aware. She understood now that I had teeth, and that I knew how to wait. The war had not started yet, but the opening move had been made, quietly, precisely, beautifully, and it had not been hers. The first time I noticed Jovi Pell, though everyone called him nutty, he was crouched beneath the old magnolia tree at the edge of the cul-de-sac, wearing a paint-splattered shirt and large green headphones that looked like something borrowed from an airport runway crew. He wasn't doing anything in particular. Just watching the street. Very still. Like a heron in shallow water. I didn't know yet that he was watching the neighborhood the way other people read books. He noticed everything. Not the things people intended to show, but the cracks. The inconsistencies. The moments the performance slipped. The things that told the truth. I didn't speak to him then. I just passed by on my way to the mailbox, feeling the weight of the brunch still lingering under my skin like a bruise. The house felt quiet when I got inside. Too quiet. Not the comforting silence of privacy, but the wary silence of being observed. And I knew. The brunch stories were already circulating. Edited. Interpreted. Distributed like leaflets in a small, bored kingdom. I made tea. Sat by the window. Watched the street, the sprinklers, the perfect lawns trimmed into compliance. I didn't cry. I didn't stiffen. I just watched back. And that was when Nutty appeared again, this time on my porch. No knocking. No clearing his throat. He simply leaned forward so his face was framed in the window next to the basil plant and said, "You went to the brunch." I didn't startle. though I probably should have. Yes, I said. He nodded, like this was expected. Practically inevitable. You survived, he added, opening my screen door as though it were his own. That's unexpected. Usually someone cries behind the bathroom door by the cheese platter. Did you cry? You don't look like you cried. I blinked. I didn't cry. Nutty stepped inside like gravity had tugged him through. Good. Crying gives Glynn nutrients. Like rainwater for orchids. He wandered toward my bookshelf, reading the spines sideways. I stared at him, at the headphone indent in his hair, the shoelaces tied in mismatched loops, the energy of a person who had 10 thoughts at once and said all of them out loud. There was no malice, no calculation, just awareness. Tea. I offered. He brightened immediately. Obviously. I poured him some. He took a sip and exhaled dramatically. Chamomile. Comfort tea. He paused. Defensive positioning. Very smart. I raised one eyebrow. You analyze beverages? Oh, everything, he said, flopping onto my couch. People tell you what they're feeling by what they hand you. Coffee means prepare yourself. Water means I don't want to talk. Herbal tea means don't be alarmed, I am not dangerous. I didn't say I wasn't dangerous. You didn't have to, he said, pointing at me with his mug. I saw your face at brunch. I sat across from him. What did you see? He leaned back like a philosopher preparing for a lecture. You were quiet. Not timid quiet. Collecting quiet. That's different. Glynn hates that. She likes when new people shine or wilt. Either one is fine, those are measurable responses. But you didn't shine or wilt. You just observed. I didn't respond. Nutty grinned. Wide. Wild. Delighted. That means you know something about something and you haven't shown it yet. Which means Glynn is going to spend the next 2 weeks trying to figure out where your edges are. I breathed out slowly. And you're telling me this because? He shrugged. Because I like when games get interesting. There was a beat of silence. And then, gently, he added. And because you're the first person in 3 years who didn't look at me like I was an inconvenience when I said hello. Something soft flickered between us. Understanding without explanation. I understood now why some people kept him at the edges of their gatherings. The wild card with no filter, no desire to maintain illusions. He didn't fit into Glynn's kingdom. People who see too much rarely do. Nutty took another sip of tea before continuing, tone shifting to something sharper. Glynn doesn't gossip. I tilted my head. No. No, he repeated. She curates narratives. I felt something click inside me, a lock turning. Nutty leaned forward. She doesn't spread rumors. That's too messy. Too obvious. Too plebeian. His voice dropped an octave. She tells stories. Concerned stories. Empathic stories. Stories where she is simply worried about someone's well-being. I thought of her hand on my back at brunch. Her voice always sweet. Always gentle. Always concerned. Oh, bless her heart. Nutty mimicked in a voice so eerily accurate that I actually laughed. I just worry about Rhea. She seems so alone. I mean, she's lovely but maybe fragile. Maybe overwhelmed. I just hope she's stable. You know how moving can shake someone. The words hit like cold water. That was it. That was exactly how she did it. Rumor by tenderness. Poison by sympathy. Dagger by silk ribbon. Nutty grinned at my expression. You see it now. Good. I swallowed slowly. She's not attacking me. She's constructing me. He snapped his fingers. Exactly. Glynn writes the character before the person can introduce themselves. And then everyone reacts to the character, not the human. And if the human resists, well, his eyes glimmered. Conflict makes the story even better. I felt a slow warmth rise inside my chest. Not anger. Recognition. Understanding. Strategy forming. Nutty watched my face again, and for the first time, his voice softened into something almost reverent. You're not scared, he murmured. No. You're not confused. No. He sat back, letting out a breathy laugh of astonishment. Oh, this is going to be fun. There was something deeply comforting about being seen, clearly, accurately, without fear or suspicion. Nutty understood the terrain. The network. the hush beneath the hydrangeas. He knew the rules of Glynn's kingdom better than anyone. And he was offering me the map. Not as a soldier, not as a spy, but as a witness who had long been waiting for someone who could play at his level. "Nutty," I said quietly. He looked up. "I'm going to let her think she's winning." He grinned. "Slow. Sharp. Dangerous." "Oh," he whispered. "You're going to spotlight her." I nodded. "And I'll help," he said without hesitation. "Not because I want to see her fall, though that will be beautiful, but because someone needs to remind this place that queens aren't born." He paused. "They're made." Silence settled, warm, steady, certain. Outside, the magnolia tree rustled. Inside, alliances shifted. The game did not begin with conflict. It began with information. Because Nutty was right. Glynn didn't gossip. She curated narratives. Which meant, all I had to do was hand her the wrong story and let her tell it for me. It was a Wednesday morning when the rumor reached me. The sun was warm, almost gentle, and the day had the soft, sweet quiet that comes right before summer fully arrives. I was rearranging the potted ferns on my front porch, the ones I hoped would make the house look lived in, steady-rooted, when my phone buzzed. A message from a potential client I'd met at the garden parade committee meeting. "Hi Rhea, something came up. We're going to postpone the consultation for now." Polite. Neutral. Too neutral. Then another client I'd been speaking with about redesigning her sunroom. "Actually, we're reconsidering the project. We'll reach out if we move forward." And another. One after another. Inquiries dried up like a river in drought. I stared at my phone, pulse steady but heavy, like my body was trying to understand something my mind already sensed. Something had shifted. Someone had shifted it. I didn't need to guess who. Nutty was right. Glynn didn't clash openly. She curated narratives. And I could feel it now, like a cold draft seeping through the seams of a house that looked airtight from the outside. I went inside and sat on the floor, back against the couch, trying to breathe past the thickness in my chest. Silence filled the space. Not empty silence, but the kind that buzzes. The kind that waits. And then came the knock. Soft. Almost gentle. I stood and opened the door. A teenager stood on my porch. Taryn, Glynn's daughter, tall and sharp-eyed, her posture caught somewhere between defiance and apology. A phone clutched in her hand, screen still glowing. She didn't meet my eyes when she spoke. "She's saying you left your last town because of someone's husband." My breath didn't catch. My heart didn't lurch. It felt like my skeleton dropped 3 inches inside my skin. Taryn still wouldn't look at me, not out of cruelty, but because something in her was ashamed to be the messenger. She said she was just praying it isn't true, but everyone knows what that means here. She swallowed. I didn't repeat it. She paused. But Nellie did. He didn't understand. And then tick-tock. I didn't need the rest. I nodded once. "Thank you for telling me," I said softly. She left fast, retreating down the walkway as though she feared her shadow might betray her. The door closed behind her. The silence returned. This time it cracked me open. Not because the rumor was awful, though it was sharp and precise in the way only well-crafted lies are. Not because it was untrue, but because it was familiar. Because it was the thing I had worked so hard to outrun. Not the accusation, but the shape of it. In my old town, there had been whispers too. Not like this. Not cruel. Not organized. But misunderstandings have a way of stretching into the spaces where loneliness lives. People talk when they don't know the whole story. People guess. People fill in silence with noise. But Glynn wasn't guessing. She was building something. A story with a moral. A story where she was protector. And I was danger. My breath trembled, and not from fear. From exhaustion. I didn't know I was crying until I tasted salt. I didn't sob. I didn't shake. Tears simply fell, quietly, steadily, like the body letting go before the mind could stop it. And that was how Mrs. Cerise found me. She didn't ask to come in. She just stepped inside the moment the door was open. Her presence soft but unyielding, like an old tree that bends in storms but does not break. She didn't speak at first. She simply sat beside me on the living room floor, knees slow, careful, like this moment had been waiting for her. Her hands were warm when they closed around mine. "Tell me," she said. And so I did. Not every detail. Not the old town. Not the scar beneath the rumor. Just enough. Just the wound Glynn had pressed her perfectly manicured thumb into. When I finished, my voice felt scraped raw. Mrs. Cerise exhaled, slow, deep. The sigh of someone who has seen this story too many times. "My dear," she said softly, "you are not the first woman whose strength was mistaken for threat." The words struck something deep inside me, something sore and unspoken. I swallowed. Hard. "What do I do?" I whispered. She looked at me. Not pitying. Not gentle. Clear. Steady. Knowing. "If a wolf shows teeth," she said, "don't cry, sharpen yours." The words didn't ignite anger. They ignited clarity. I stopped wiping my tears. I stopped shaking. My breathing steadied, slow and deep. I was not breaking down. I was changing shape. Mrs. Cerise squeezed my hands once more before she stood. "Glynn wants you to defend yourself," she said. "Because defense looks like guilt, no matter how honest. Let her think her story is working. Let her think she knows your moves." I looked up at her, and I knew she saw it. The shift. The turning. The quiet decision. "You're not going to fight her," Mrs. Cerise said. "No," I whispered. "You're going to perform." Her smile was small, but satisfied. "That's my girl." She left me standing in the doorway. The house warm, the air still, the world no longer tilted. I thought of Glynn's smile. Her curated sincerity. Her practiced worry. Her delicate daggers disguised as concern. She believed stories were control. She believed attention was power. So I would give her both. Not with shouting. Not with accusation. Not with defense. But with theater. Let her watch me shine. Let her watch others love me. Let her watch her own story crumble under its own weight. I wiped my face. Stood tall. Set the kettle on to boil. My hands were steady now. The hurt was still there, yes. But something else had joined it. Something bright. Something sharp. Something patient. This was no longer about surviving Glynn. This was about exposing her. By being everything she said I wasn't. By being seen, not spoken about. The neighborhood wanted a story. Fine. I would give them one. And Glynn would never see the ending coming. The morning after I made my decision, I opened my closet and realized I had been dressing like a whisper. Soft colors. Safe silhouettes. Clothes meant to disappear into rooms rather than occupy them. Not anymore. I pulled out the deep green wrap dress, the one I'd been saving for a special occasion. This was not celebration. But it was something like coronation. I brushed my hair differently, loose waves instead of the neat low bun I'd worn since moving here. Something freer. Something that said I have nothing to hide. I added a touch more eyeliner. Not vanity, precision. The mirror didn't show a new person. It showed the woman I had paused. The woman I had once known how to be. When I stepped outside, the air felt clearer. I didn't wait to be seen. I made myself visible. I walked to the community garden, where women gathered mid-morning to prune, gossip, and maintain their little patches of curated nature. They looked up when they saw me, some in surprise, some in the expectant curiosity of those waiting to be told who they should be today. I smiled warm, confident, sunlit. "Good morning," I said, and they echoed it back, the sound rippling unevenly, like a wind chime missing a few notes. Glynn wasn't there yet. She always arrived last, to be noticed. So I began without her. I complimented Mrs. Ashby's tomato vines, genuinely with detail. I offered pruning tips to young Alice, who looked startled to be addressed like an adult rather than an accessory to her mother's ego. I laughed easily. Not loudly, just enough for others to lean in. When Glynn finally swept into the garden in her pastel workout outfit, perfectly clean, untouched by any real work, her smile was bright enough to blind. "Rhea," she sang, arms spread as though she were greeting a beloved sister. And I smiled back as though I believed her. "Glynn," I said warmly, stepping closer so she had to adjust her posture. "You look radiant this morning. That color is beautiful on you." The compliment was soft, gracious, public, and it cornered her. If she rejected it, she was petty. If she accepted it, she acknowledged I was close enough to speak to her. Her smile didn't flicker, but the muscles in her jaw did. "Oh, thank you," she replied, voice extra sweet. "You look refreshed." We both understood the subtext. The audience did too, but I kept smiling, easy, unworried, impossible to root into scandal. The women around us watched, shifting like a school of fish sensing a change in current. The game had begun. The first gathering at my home happened 3 days later. I didn't announce it in the Facebook group. I didn't send mass texts. I didn't try to compete. I simply invited 3 neighbors casually, one during a walk, one at the grocery store, one at the mailbox. Individually. Personally. As though I truly wanted them, not the effect of hosting. People don't trust events. People trust invitations. We sat on my porch in the golden afternoon light, lemonade, soft jazz, laughter punctuated by the squeaking of swings at the park nearby. It was small, warm, effortless, and because it wasn't advertised, it spread faster than if I had posted a flyer. The next morning, the cul-de-sac was humming. "Oh, Rhea is such a lovely host. Rhea has such grace. Rhea seems so genuine." Words that Glynn had previously reserved for herself. Not taken by force. Given freely. That is what threatened her. The shift didn't happen overnight. But it was visible. The first time Glynn tried to make a concerned comment about me in front of others, I didn't challenge her. I laughed. Softly. Kindly. "Oh, Glynn," I said, touching her wrist gently. "You always worry. I'm perfectly all right. Truly." And then I turned the conversation toward her. Bright, open, curious. "How is your mother doing? I remember you said she wasn't feeling well last week." Concern. Attention. Affection. I gave her everything she had used to manipulate. But without the poison. And people noticed. Because sincerity glows. And imitation glitters. And one of those burns out fast. The real change came at the Saturday market, where everyone went to be seen being wholesome. Glynn was speaking to 2 women near the lavender stand when I approached. She hadn't noticed me yet. Her voice was in full gentle martyr mode. "I do worry about Rhea," she was saying softly. "She's just been through so much. And with how emotional she gets sometimes." I touched her shoulder lightly from behind. "Glynn, I was just telling Marcia how beautifully you organized the garden brunch last month. You make hosting look effortless." Her eyes flickered. Just for a moment. Long enough for the women beside her to see. Long enough for them to file that flicker away like a sharp little note. Then I turned to the others with open warmth. "She has such a gift for community building. Really, I don't know how she manages everything and still keeps herself so put together. It's admirable." Something in her smile strained, just slightly. Because I didn't attack her. I adored her. Publicly. Generously. And admiration can feel like sunlight. Beautiful. And blinding. When I walked away, I could feel her stare between my shoulder blades, sharp as a pin. I didn't look back. Because the performance wasn't for her. It was for the audience. The neighborhood didn't shift all at once. But slowly, subtly, like a flock changing direction in midair. Mothers waved longer when I passed. Children stopped calling me Ms. Sunflower who cries at night. They called me Ms. Sunflower again. Men nodded with quiet respect, though they did not yet know why. I did not speak badly of Glynn. I did not defend myself. I did not correct the rumor. I simply became undeniable. And Glynn began to feel it. Not in grand moments. In the smallest ones. The way a conversation would continue when she stepped into a group instead of pausing for her. The way someone asked me for plant advice instead of her. The way people's eyes didn't always flick to her first in social spaces. Being admired was not her power. Being central was. And now, slowly, steadily, the center was moving. Not toward me. Away from her. Which was worse. She did not speak to me directly for days. Not warmly. Not coldly. Just silence. The kind that waits for something to break. Except nothing was breaking. Everything was blooming. One afternoon, Nutty appeared on my porch again. Crunching peanuts, of course, looking delighted. "You're doing it," he said, pointing a peanut at me like it was a dagger. "You're not fighting her. You're diluting her." I smiled faintly. "I'm giving her the spotlight she asked for," I said. He laughed, full body and bright. "Oh, she hates it. She's going to spiral. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. And when she does," he snapped. "Paper crown." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The stage was set. The audience was turning. And Glynn, queen of the cul-de-sac, was beginning to feel the floor shift beneath her throne. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't defending anything. I was performing. And she was finally being seen. Not as she pretended to be, but as she truly was. And nothing terrifies a storyteller more than the realization that someone else has started writing the narrative. They said the garden parade was the heart of the cul-de-sac. A day of flowers, light, and perfect smiles. A day when lawns were judged, children carried ribbon wands, and front porches were transformed into miniature worlds. What no one said aloud was that the festival was also social theater, a hierarchy showcase. Who was adored? Who was respectable? Who was forgettable? And who was being quietly weighed for removal? Glynn usually won, or at least controlled who did. She was the parade chair, the coordinator, the announcer, the person who determined the theme each year. The event existed, socially, to spotlight her reign. So when I walked into the volunteer sign-up meeting and said, lightly, "I'd love to design the parade centerpiece this year," it was like the air temperature changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but something shifted. Glynn's smile didn't falter. Of course it didn't, but the corners tightened. A small, nearly invisible wince appeared at the edge of her eye. "Oh," she said, voice honeyed and warm, "how lovely that you want to be involved." Translation: "You're either very stupid or very bold." Mrs. Cerise, who sat quietly near the window, looked at me over her glasses and gave the slightest nod. Jovi Nutty Pell, seated in a puffy blue jacket despite it being warm outside, leaned back and whispered loudly to no one in particular. "Well, this'll be better than cable." I didn't look at him, but my spine straightened. The rumors Glynn had spread about me were still floating in the air, softened now by something new. Curiosity, unease. Whispers had shifted tone. The neighborhood wasn't sure who I was anymore. And that uncertainty was power. I signed my name next to centerpiece designer with calm, steady strokes of pen. Glynn clapped her hands together as if she had just witnessed a delightful surprise performance. "Everyone, let's all give Rhea a warm welcome into our tradition," she chirped. Some smiled politely. Some looked at Glynn first, waiting for permission before reacting. But I noticed something important. Not everyone looked back at her. And she noticed that too. Her throat tightened before she continued the meeting. The garden parade theme for the year was Roots of Home. Oh, the irony. Because nothing in this neighborhood had roots. Not naturally. They were planted, groomed, pruned, trimmed into shapes that looked natural but were carefully controlled. I didn't want to mimic that. No glossy perfection. No curated wholesomeness. I wanted something alive. Over the next 2 weeks, I collected twisted driftwood, copper wire, glass beads, pressed lilies, scraps of lace, clay tiles stamped with fingerprints, stones worn down by creek water. I spent evenings on my porch, in full view of the neighborhood, not hiding anymore, not shrinking. People slowing down during dog walks would see me bent over my work, soft music playing, hair tied loosely, hands steady. They would see me building something. Not unraveling, not breaking, not crying. This time, I was choosing to be seen. Mrs. Cerise visited often, always without announcing herself, always with herbal teas and silent company. "You're using real roots," she observed one evening, watching me weave thin tree roots into a twisting spiral structure. "Yes." Not the decorative ones from craft stores. No. She smiled in that slow, knowing, tired way of a woman who has lived long enough to see cycles repeat. "Good," she said. "Real things make liars nervous." Glynn pretended not to watch. Of course she watched. Her kitchen window faced my porch. Every evening around 8:30, I would see her silhouette. Perfect posture, Glass of white wine. Stillness too intentional to be casual. A queen monitoring a threat. But I didn't look back at her. Attention is fuel, and I would not feed her fire. The morning of the parade arrived warm and gentle, sunlight brushing the pavement in soft gold. The cul-de-sac felt like a stage, lawn chairs lining sidewalks, string lights stretched between mailboxes, pastel banners fluttering between lampposts. Children laughed. Dogs barked. The air smelled like baked bread and lavender sunscreen. I carried the centerpiece carefully, a sculpture of intertwined roots rising upward, wrapped with beads that caught the light like water droplets. At the center, a mirror made of small, broken pieces forming a mosaic sunburst. It reflected not a perfect whole, but many fragments making a single shape. When the sunlight hit it, it glowed. Not flashy, not gaudy, just real. Glynn approached, wearing a floral dress that was perfectly tailored and perfectly strategic. Her hair curled in soft waves, pearls at her ears, smiles stretched wide. "Well," she said, "that's certainly different." "Thank you," I said evenly. A small crowd gathered. Whispers. Soft gasps. "It's beautiful. It looks alive. It feels like us." Glynn laughed, brittle. "Oh yes, of course," she said. "Very organic." Jovi Nutty Pell shouted from across the lawn. "Look, it's like art. Not like those plastic wreaths you buy in bulk, Glynn." The crowd laughed. Not at Glynn exactly, but near her. Which is worse? Her smile froze. But I didn't turn toward her. I didn't defend. I didn't perform submission. I simply kept adjusting the centerpiece. Gentle, intentional, serene. The judges walked by later. 3 long-time residents with clipboards and the air of people who take their jobs far too seriously. They studied every display, but they lingered at mine. The oldest judge touched the root structure softly. "It breathes," she murmured. And then, people started asking me questions. About plants. About design. About my work. Clients who had canceled started uncanceling, quietly, without words of apology, but with eyes that said, "We misjudged." The attention shifted, like wind changing direction. And Glynn felt it. Her voice rose half an octave. Her laughter got louder. Her posture stiffened. But she didn't say anything. Because this wasn't loud victory. This was slow, quiet erosion. The kind that starts at the foundation. When the awards were announced, the centerpiece didn't win first place, but it didn't have to. It won people's choice. And everyone knew what that meant. Not official power, but influence, warmth, curiosity, trust, the opposite of fear. When they placed the ribbon in my hand, I didn't look at Glynn. I didn't need to. The shift had already begun. The stage she once commanded was no longer hers alone. And she knew it. As the sun set and lanterns flickered to life along the sidewalks, I stood beside my sculpture, watching the mirror pieces catch firelight and scatter it back into the world. Mrs. Cerise joined me. "You did not attack her," she said. "No. You did not defend yourself. No. You simply existed." "Yes." She nodded, satisfied. "That is how you take a throne," she said. "Not by force. Not by begging. But by showing the kingdom another possible center." I exhaled, slowly. Something in me settled. The game had changed. And Glynn? She had just realized she was no longer the only storyteller in this neighborhood. But I wasn't done. This wasn't the end. This was chess. And the queen had just been placed in check. The garden parade glow lingered for days. People waved a little longer when they saw me. Conversations didn't end abruptly when I approached. The silence, the kind weighted with judgments I hadn't earned, began thinning out like fog touched by sunlight. Even children who had once whispered Ms. Sunflower cries at night now called out, "Miss Rhea, can we see the bead sculpture again?" Their voices were bright, curious, free of venom someone else had planted. I didn't mistake this shift for unconditional acceptance. Not yet. This place was a web, and the spider was still very much alive. But the web had begun to snag, and the spider had begun to notice. Glynn's smile had become slightly too wide, slightly too rehearsed. Her laugh carried a brittle chime, like a wine glass tapped too hard. She walked faster, talked faster, waved faster, as though trying to outrun something invisible. Because people weren't looking to her first anymore. They were looking at me, and at each other, and at themselves. Questioning. Doubt was the smallest seed, but once planted, it spread like ivy, quietly, persistently, without invitation. I didn't rush anything. I didn't boast. I didn't celebrate. I simply existed, which was apparently the most threatening thing I could do. The unraveling didn't start with a confrontation. It didn't start with a dramatic argument or a neighborhood scene. It started at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, with a TikTok. I was sitting on my porch, tea cooling beside me, the night breathing softly across the cul-de-sac. Crickets hummed. A distant television murmured. The air held that stillness that only comes when suburbia pretends it has no secrets. My phone buzzed. A notification from Jovi Nutty Pell. Nutty. Hi, you gotta see this. Turn volume up. And don't sip anything you care about. Then a link. A video. Posted by @Taryn_board. I recognized the username. Taryn, Glynn's daughter. 17. Soft-spoken. Always watching the ground when her mother talked for her. The kind of girl who seemed to live inside her own ribs, waiting for space to breathe. The video opened with Taryn's face, lit by the glow of her phone screen. Her hair was tied up carelessly, hoodie collar half covering her mouth. Caption. POV, your mom lies so much she forgets which story she told well. I froze. The video cut to text overlay. When your mom tells the neighbors you're on a special advanced AP track. Taryn made a straight-faced stare at the camera. Then another clip. But she also told someone else you're in a special support group because of emotional sensitivity. Another stare. No words. Just truth. Deadpan truth. Uncomfortable truth. Humorous, but only because humor is often how pain escapes when it can't scream. Then the last clip. She doesn't gossip. She curates narratives. For her image. And she looked into the camera this time. Really looked. Eyes tired. Mouth flat. Soul showing. My mom tells lies to make herself look good, she said. Clear. Plain. Unforced. The video ended. I sat completely still. The silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like the moment right before a storm hits the ground. The comments were already piling up. Locals, neighbors, schoolmates. OMG, wait, is your mom? I knew something was off. She said my mom was unstable BC, she didn't volunteer enough. This makes so much sense. She's so nice to teachers and so mean at home. Girl, be safe though. The algorithm didn't need to go viral globally. It only needed to go viral locally, and it had. Nutty sent another message. Welcome to Act 3. The next morning, the quiet in the cul-de-sac wasn't the same quiet it used to be. This was charged quiet. The kind that comes when everyone knows something, and knows everyone else knows they know. I saw curtains move when I walked by. But this time, the eyes behind them weren't wary of me. They were wary of her. People stepped a little further back when Glynn approached them during her morning walk. Conversations ended abruptly, but now, they were ending around her. Her smile tightened like a thread pulled too taut. She tried to perform normal. She always performed normal. Good morning, she called to a couple watering their basil pots. They nodded, forced, polite, no warmth. She tried again. Lovely weather today. They murmured something soft and excused themselves quickly, heading inside. She stood alone on the sidewalk for several seconds. Not moving. Breathing too sharply. Eyes flicking, almost calculating. The performance was slipping. And when the performance slips, the person shows. By afternoon, the neighborhood Facebook group, The Perfect Cul-de-sac, was on fire. Not overtly, of course. This neighborhood would never degrade itself to open conflict. No, everything happened sideways. Polite. Coded. Quiet. Post-slick. Sometimes leadership requires listening, not speaking. I think we should remember every story has two sides. My daughter struggles too. No shame. Lots of love. But beneath each comment lay the same truth. They knew. They had always known. They had simply chosen not to care, until now. Glynn responded with a long post, too long, saying she supported her daughter's creative expression, that teenagers sometimes misinterpret the pressures of high-performing households, and that any suggestion she was dishonest was deeply hurtful to her as a mother committed to excellence. The tone was wrong. Too defensive. Too self-referential. Too panicked. And everyone noticed. I didn't engage. Not a like. Not a comment. Not a reaction. Silence can be louder than accusation. At sunset, I found Taryn sitting on the curb near the end of the street, legs crossed, hoodie sleeves covering her hands. She didn't look at me when I approached, but she didn't leave either. I sat beside her, not too close. We watched the sky melt through shades of gold, pink, and ash blue. She spoke first. I didn't post it to hurt her. Her voice was quiet, but firm. I know, I said. Taryn swallowed. She tells stories about me like I'm not real. Like I'm a character she's writing. Or a mirror. Or something she has to polish all the time. I nodded. She breathed slowly, carefully. When I saw your centerpiece, she said, barely above a whisper, I realized I want to be me. Not a version she edits. Silence settled again, warm this time. You did something brave, I said. Not exalted. Not exaggerated. Just true. She nodded once. Not proud. But certain. Before she left, she turned and looked at me, really looked. You're the first person she can't narrate over, she said. And then she walked home. That night, Glynn's house was dark earlier than usual. Lights off. Curtains drawn. Silhouette absent from the kitchen window. But I didn't relax. A cornered animal is most dangerous when it realizes the cage was always open, and no one chose to stay. The collapse had begun. Not loud. Not violent. But inevitable. A card castle doesn't fall all at once. It shivers. It shifts. It sighs. And then, with the softest breath, it breaks. The air felt different the morning it happened. The cul-de-sac was awake early. Sprinklers ticking in neat arcs, someone's radio murmuring an old love song, dogs tugging leashes against still sleepy owners. It was one of those mornings where nothing appears to be wrong, but you can feel the atmosphere holding its breath. I was arranging a tray of scones on the folding table we'd set up for the neighborhood community cleanup day, a yearly ritual where people pretended to bond while pulling weeds and trimming hedges. Children ran around with trash grabbers, half performing, half playing. The adults, well, they watched each other more than they watched the trash. I had volunteered to handle refreshments. Nothing grand. Just enough to be seen. To be steady. To be present. I wore a soft yellow dress, the color of morning. No message. No proclamation. Just warmth. And then I felt it. A shift in the air. You don't have to see a storm to know one is forming. I looked up, and there she was. Glynn. She walked down her driveway like she was descending a stage. Every motion calculated. Every step assumed attention. But something was wrong. Her mascara was too heavy. Her smile was too stiff. Her posture was too controlled, as if she was holding herself together by sheer force of will. People watched her, politely, cautiously, the way you watch someone walking on ice that you know is too thin. She walked directly toward me. No greeting. No polite transition. Just arrival. Rhea, she said too brightly. I didn't flinch. Glynn. She placed one hand over her heart, dramatic, performative, nearly theatrical. I just think we should clear the air. There it was. The announcement of confrontation, disguised as emotional sincerity. The oldest trick in the social warfare book. People slowed their movements. Heads lifted. Bodies angled subtly toward us. She wanted an audience. Of course she did. Glynn didn't fight in private. She fought where she could win the narrative. She continued, her voice trembling just enough to seem vulnerable. I've heard things, Rhea. Things that people are saying about me. And I want to give you the chance to deny being involved. The framing was clever. Not accusation. Not blame. Opportunity. She was good. Very good. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stiffen. I didn't react. Glynn, I said softly, you seem upset. That threw her off. Just a fraction, but enough that her eyes flickered. "I'm concerned," she corrected quickly. "For this community. I've always worked hard to maintain trust here. And now people are being influenced by misinformation." It was fascinating, watching someone unravel beneath their own performance. She was speaking at everyone, not to me. I didn't respond. Silence is uncomfortable, but silence also exposes. She continued, faster now. "I've only ever tried to support you, Rhea. I welcomed you here. I helped you. And now people are turning on me because of you. That did it. The shift. Not in me. In them. Every person around us, every mother holding a rake, every father tying a trash bag, every teenager pretending not to listen. Their bodies tightened. Subtle, but visible. Because the sentence wasn't concern. It was entitlement. "I welcomed you. You owe me." It echoed. And it landed. I looked around us, at eyes waiting to see if this would become spectacle. Then I breathed in the slow, grounding kind of breath that reaches the spine, and I began to speak. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. "When I was younger," I said, "I lived in a town where I never quite fit in. I was quiet. I worked hard. I tried to be kind." The rustle of leaves stopped, a child paused mid-skip. Even the wind softened, as if listening. And when people didn't know me, I continued, they filled the empty spaces with stories. Stories about who I was, what I felt, why I left, who I loved. Stories that sounded kind, but cut quietly. My voice didn't shake. I wasn't speaking to Glynn, I was speaking to the part of everyone here that had ever been misunderstood. I learned something then. I said, when people choose to misunderstand you, when they decide your story for you, there is nothing you can say to change their minds. So instead of explaining myself, I chose to live in a way that made explanations unnecessary. Someone exhaled, a soft, emotional sound. I continued. I don't want to be defended. I don't want to be believed. I don't want to be pitied. I just want to be seen. Honestly. Quietly. As I am. I smiled, gentle, not triumphant, just true. And I am not here to take anything from anyone. My eyes flicked once briefly to Glynn. But I won't apologize for existing. The silence that followed was not empty. It was revelatory. Glynn opened her mouth, but no words came. Because if she spoke now, she would be attacking kindness. And that is a battle no audience supports. She searched the faces around her. Not one person stepped closer. Not one person nodded. Not one person came to her defense. The social air, the subtle hierarchy she had thrived on, had shifted. Not loudly. Not violently. Quietly. I watched it happen. Her power didn't shatter. It dissolved. Her shoulders dropped, just slightly. Not in defeat. In recognition. She was alone. She walked away slowly, not rushed, not dramatic. Just small. For the first time since I arrived, she looked like someone without a stage. People didn't look at me like a hero. They looked at me like a person. Seen. Understood. Unequivocally present. The neighborhood didn't cheer. There were no applause, no announcements, no declarations. Just something much louder. A collective shift. The center of gravity had moved. And it wasn't hers anymore, no one declared it. No announcement was made. No dramatic showdown occurred. But every kingdom has a moment where the wind changes direction. For Glynn, it started with silence. Not a loud, punishing silence, the kind that slams doors or leaves rooms heavy with tension. No. This silence was polite. Soft. Courteous. But unmistakably closed. The fading of invitations. One Tuesday morning, Glynn checked her phone the way she always did, expecting the group chat to buzz with plans, gossip, ideas for the next charity brunch or themed dinner. Nothing. She refreshed the screen again. Still nothing. Later that afternoon, she saw photos posted to the group feed, a small luncheon on the sunlit back patio of a neighbor's house, pale lemon tablecloths, delicate pastries, laughter. Glynn stared at the pictures long enough for her coffee to go cold. She noticed something else too. Rhea was there. Not in the back. Not on the fringe. Not pretending to belong. She was at the center of a gentle, effortless orbit, her shoulders relaxed, eyes warmed, smile soft and natural. Not glowing in a way that demanded attention. Glowing in a way that invited it. Glynn felt something seize in her chest. Not jealousy. Something worse. Irrelevance. Attempts to reclaim territory. The next day, Glynn marched into the florist's shop, her presence as crisp and tight as her linen blazer. She ordered a towering arrangement, sunflowers and lilies and wild grasses, something large enough to say, "I am still the pulse of this neighborhood." She delivered it personally to Mrs. Holden's front door, one of the most influential women in the area. The moment the vase touched the foyer table, Mrs. Holden's smile became polite. Not warm, not hostile, just polite. Glynn knew that tone. She had used it on others for years, and she finally understood what it felt like from the other side. Conversations dry up. Neighbors did not avoid Glynn outright. That would suggest conflict. No. They simply didn't offer anything to her anymore. No gossip. No concerns. No invitations into their personal thoughts. They talked to her about weather. Gardens. The price of eggs. Surface-level conversation. Tidy and contained. Like a fence politely placed between them. The more Glynn tried to lean closer, to tap into her old rhythm, the way she used to nudge and prod and charm, the more people took small steps back. They didn't accuse her of anything. They simply stopped trusting her. And trust, once gone, does not announce its departure. It just leaves quietly. The loneliness creeps in. Glynn's house, once the social hub of the neighborhood, always lit, always busy, always curated, began to echo. She didn't turn on music anymore. It made the emptiness louder. Her kitchen table became a place where she sat with her phone face down beside her mug of tea, hoping it would vibrate with something. Anything that confirmed she still mattered. Some days, she scrolled through old texts to remind herself that she used to be wanted, needed, feared even. Being feared had felt like being powerful. Now she saw the difference. Fear is not love. Fear is not respect. Fear is not belonging. Fear is a currency that eventually runs out. Mrs. Cerise's visit. One late afternoon, Glynn heard a knock on her door. Soft, slow, patient. She opened it to find Mrs. Cerise standing there, small, silver-haired, gentle-eyed, carrying a tin of almond biscuits wrapped in lace. The two sat in the garden, where the late sun filtered through branches. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Glynn whispered, voice brittle, "I don't understand. I was only trying to be part of things." Mrs. Cerise didn't soften the truth, but she didn't sharpen it either. "My dear," she said, folding her hands neatly in her lap, "you wanted to be at the center of things. That is different." Glynn flinched. Mrs. Cerise continued, tone kind but steady. "When someone builds a throne from gossip, they rule only over distrust." The words landed like a bell, quiet, resonant, undeniable. Glynn's breath trembled. Her eyes lowered to her hands. Hands that had once waved people in, orchestrated laughter, directed stories. Hands that had shaped the social world of the neighborhood. Now they only fidgeted. "Is it too late?" Glynn asked, voice small. Mrs. Cerise smiled, a sad, wise smile of someone who has seen many human stories unfold, repeat, collapse, rebuild. "It is never too late to grow," she said. "But it is too late to pretend." The next neighborhood gathering was a small evening tea hosted outdoors. Rhea was there, present, but not triumphant, warm, but not gloating. She spoke softly, listened fully, laughing only when laughter came, not performing for approval. People felt her sincerity. They noticed the absence of pretense. Glynn attended too, sitting near the edge, quiet, a woman trying to recalibrate the rhythm of her presence. No one excluded her, but no one followed her lead anymore. The social center had shifted. And slowly, gently, without hostility or spectacle, the neighborhood revolved around Rhea. Not as a queen, but as a root. Someone grounded. Steady. Real. Glynn saw it. She understood. And even in the sting of loss, somewhere deep and aching, she saw the truth. Rhea had not defeated her. Rhea had simply stopped needing to be defended. And the world had responded to that honesty. The kingdom built on whispers may stand for a season, but a garden grown with truth endures. Some endings do not arrive with applause. Some endings are simply quiet. A shift in air. A loosening in the chest. A settling of dust that had been floating for months, maybe years. This was one of those endings. Not a triumph shouted from rooftops. Not a victory posed and photographed. A peace finally allowed to land. And I learned something in all of this. Glynn didn't crave power. She didn't crave popularity. She didn't even crave control. She craved attention, the kind that tells you, you matter. You're seen. You exist in the world because others look back when you look out. And so, yes, she wanted attention. So I gave it to her. But not the kind she expected. Not the kind that feeds ego or performance. I gave her the attention of truth. The kind you can't hide from. The kind that holds up a mirror. Clean, quiet, unflinching. The kind that shows you who you are when the performance falls away. And sometimes, the hardest attention to receive is simply being seen clearly. The neighborhood feels different now. Not louder, lighter. People talk more deeply. Laugh more easily. Visit each other's gardens just because the weather is nice. No stage. No spotlight. No unspoken competition humming beneath the surface. We share recipes. We ask real questions. We listen to the answers. We don't whisper to fill silence anymore. We enjoy it. The gatherings are smaller now, not for exclusivity, but for comfort. Tea on porches. Children running barefoot in the grass. Someone's old radio crackling soft music into the dusk. Warmth. Not performance. Connection. Not choreography. Home. Not theater. Sometimes in the late afternoon, when the light turns honey-colored and soft, I see Glynn. She stands at her window. Not watching hungrily. Not plotting. Not calculating the next move. Just watching. Like someone learning a new language. Slowly, carefully, with the humility of a beginner. I don't wave. She doesn't hide. The curtain she used to tug for effect now simply hangs. Real. Still unremarkable. She is present, but no longer demanding to be the center. And I think that is its own quiet kind of grace. Maybe she is learning. Maybe she is grieving what she thought she needed to be. Maybe someday, she will join us on a porch step with a story told softly, not sharpened. But that is her journey. Not mine to rush. Not mine to correct. Not mine to fix. Just hers. There is a misunderstanding about revenge. People imagine it as a clash, a strike, a dramatic reclaiming of power. But I know better now. The loudest revenge is not the confrontation, not the speech, not the audience. The loudest revenge is a life that refuses to shrink. A life lived fully, unapologetically, warmly, truthfully, not to prove anything. Just because you finally remember you deserve to take up space. And once you learn that, really learn it, no one can take it away from you. Not gossip. Not insecurity. Not envy. Not fear. The light stays. Because it grew from inside. The loudest revenge is a life that refuses to shrink.